Story 1. He knew the police wouldn't find him. This happened to me in 2018 in a town called Chambersfield, Ohio. At the time, I lived alone in a ground-floor unit of a 4-apartment house, the kind with a shared porch and creaky old wooden floors. I had moved in after a breakup, one of those slow, quiet separations where no one's really at fault. I needed time. I needed silence. I got both. The apartment itself was nothing special. Old radiators, chipped tile in the bathroom, paint that flaked like dry skin if you brushed too hard against it. But it was affordable, and it felt harmless. The first tap came during my second week there. A soft, almost lazy knock on the window above my kitchen sink. I thought it was a branch or maybe a neighbor's cat jumping from the ledge. I looked outside. Nothing. Shrugged it off. It happened again the next night, this time closer to 2 a.m. One single knock. I reported it just to be safe. The officer was polite but unconcerned. No footprints, no signs of forced entry. Probably the pipes, he said, as if old pipes knock on glass. I tried to believe him, but the knocks continued. Always one tap, always at 2 a.m. Eventually, I stopped calling it in. What could I even say? "Excuse me, officer. Someone's knocking at the same time every night, but never trying to get in." The knocks became something I braced for. I'd lie in bed, counting down the minutes, phone in hand, but never dialing. After a while, I stopped feeling fear. The rhythm made it feel less like a threat and more like a routine. I started staying awake for them. I'd sit on the couch, lights off, blinds drawn, eyes on the clock. The tap would come, never early, never late. Once I whispered, "I hear you," under my breath right after the sound. There was no reply. Nothing changed. By the third week, I could predict the tap to the second. It became like the creak of settling wood or the rattle of the fridge, an embedded part of the apartment's soundscape. That's when I stopped reporting it, and that's when it changed. The knock moved, not louder, just different. Instead of the kitchen window, it came from the hallway right next to the bedroom door, a spot that had no exterior windows, just drywall and darkness. I froze. For the first time in days, my pulse spiked. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. No second tap came. I told myself it was in my head, that my body had learned to expect the knock, and now it was filling in the silence with something worse. But the next night, same time, same place, the knock came again. Hollow, close, inside. I didn't call the police, not because I didn't want help, because I already knew how it would go. They'd come, they'd see nothing, they'd note it down, and they'd leave. And he'd still be here. The knock never came twice in the same night, never before or after 2 a.m. Just once, always once. Sometimes it was at the front door, sometimes the back. Once it came from behind my bathroom mirror. I slept less and less, not out of fear, out of obligation. If I slept through it, I felt like I was giving up something, like acknowledging it was pointless to notice anymore. It wasn't long before I stopped reacting entirely. I'd hear it. I'd note it. Then I'd return to whatever I was doing. And that's exactly when everything else started. It was subtle at first. Near the window in the living room, a damp spot in the carpet, not wet, just off. Slightly darker than the surrounding fabric. I pressed my palm into it. Cool, but not soaked. No obvious leak. I ran my fingers along the wall below the sill. Dry. I checked the window seal. Intact. Still, every morning that patch would feel not dry, not saturated, just lightly chilled and wrong, like something had stood there for a long time, breathed there, waited there. I cleaned it, blotted it, sprinkled baking soda over it and vacuumed. It always returned. I stopped walking barefoot. One night I stayed up late, later than usual. Around 4 a.m. I passed the window and froze. The blinds were trembling. Not violently, just a soft, rhythmic twitch. The radiator wasn't on. No wind, no draft. I stepped closer. That spot of carpet, darker now, was visibly depressed. Like weight had just been lifted off it. I lifted the blinds in one swift motion. Nothing. Just the alley. But I swear, the faint smell of something wet lingered in the air. I called maintenance the next morning. The guy showed up with a moisture sensor and shrugged when he found no significant readings. Probably condensation, or maybe your fridge's defrost cycle, he said. The fridge was on the other side of the apartment. I started noticing other small things. My shampoo bottle moved from the corner to the center of the tub overnight. A chair pulled an inch away from the dining table. Nothing stolen, nothing broken, no signs of entry, and yet the carpet patch grew. By mid-month it had widened, maybe a foot across. Always in the same place, no smell, no mold, just a lingering cold, like body heat in reverse. I bought a second camera, positioned it to face the window from inside, but I never caught anything. Every night the footage would cut out for about 10 seconds between 1:59 and 2:01 a.m. Both cameras. Just a black screen, then back on. I showed a friend. He laughed and said maybe the ghost respected personal space, but I wasn't laughing, because I'd started hearing something else. Breathing. Not loud, not inhuman, just slow, measured, close. It came from behind me, always when I was brushing my teeth. I would pause mid-stroke and just listen, inhale, hold, exhale, then nothing. The sound never repeated, never happened twice in one night. But it happened. I started brushing with the door open, then with the lights on in the hallway. Then I stopped brushing at night altogether, and the spot in the carpet, it never dried. I moved my bed to the other side of the apartment, but some nights, not all, just some, I'd wake to find the damp patch had moved. It was always at a window. I finally decided to break my lease. I knew there'd be penalties, but I didn't care anymore. I'd already lost sleep, weight, friends, and whatever lived inside that space, it wasn't just watching, it was waiting. That was worse. The property manager didn't ask questions, just handed me the paperwork. When I returned my keys, I asked, "Has anyone else ever mentioned anything strange about that unit?" He blinked slowly and said, "No one stayed in it more than a few months. Usually people leave for job changes." He didn't smile. He didn't meet my eye. I moved out that same night. Slept at a friend's place on their couch, curled up like I was still in danger. 2 weeks later, I got a call from the police. "Are you the former tenant of 1B at Maplewood Terrace?" the officer asked. I said yes. "We're following up on a missing persons report." Apparently, the next tenant, an elderly man, had disappeared. No signs of forced entry, no known health issues. His mail was piling up. A neighbor finally called it in. When they entered the unit, the back window was cracked open, not broken, just slightly ajar. And the carpet? Still damp. They asked if I'd seen anything unusual during my time there. I lied, said I had insomnia, but nothing strange. I knew better, because I remembered the last thing I found before I left, a piece of crumpled paper inside the closet wall, slipped behind the drywall through a hole I hadn't noticed before. No envelope, just folded notebook paper. It said in tiny handwritten letters, "He doesn't need to break in. He needs time and belief." I never showed anyone the note. I threw it in a dumpster 6 towns away. They never found the old man. The police eventually labeled it as inconclusive, no signs of foul play. Of course they did, because there were no fingerprints, no cameras, no shattered locks, just a cold carpet and a cracked window. And you can't arrest a presence. I live in a new apartment now, different city, higher floor, but every few weeks I wake up at 2 a.m. and I listen, not for a knock, but for breathing. Did you enjoy the content and it made a difference for you? Click on Super Thanks and support our work. Story 2, I told them about the man in the attic. This happened to me in 2022 in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I'd just moved into a duplex on the edge of town. Not quite rural, but just far enough from the city center that the streetlights were sparse and the nights went silent before 10 p.m. I was 31. I worked from home, freelancing as a transcriptionist, so my hours were flexible. Too flexible. I started going to bed late, waking up at odd times, feeling disconnected from the flow of time. To fix this, I started taking melatonin. Then low-dose sleeping pills. Then blackout curtains. I even unplugged the router at night to avoid any temptation to scroll. Still, every night, without fail, I woke up at 4:11 a.m. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence. Then maybe it was something external, traffic, heating pipes, an animal outside. But no matter how tired I was or how heavily I slept, my eyes would snap open, always at 4:11. It wasn't gradual either. No tossing, no shifting awake, just instant awareness. The first few times I tried to ignore it. I'd roll over, close my eyes again, wait for morning. But eventually the consistency started to bother me. It wasn't just that I was waking up. It was that I was being woken. I started paying attention. I'd lie still, not moving, not blinking. I didn't want to disrupt anything that might be listening back. The sounds of the house were typical. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint rush of water through old pipes, sometimes the ticking of the heating system starting up. But sometimes there was something else, something slower, not mechanical, a creak in the ceiling, the soft compression of old wood, as if someone had shifted weight just above me. The attic hatch was in the hallway, just outside my bedroom. I hadn't touched it since moving in. The landlord had said it was just insulation and dust up there, nothing worth storing. Still, the idea of waking up at the same time each night, the exact minute, and hearing that small shift above me, it gnawed at me. I tried to record it. I set up a sleep tracking app, then a simple sound recorder. Both failed to capture anything conclusive. Once or twice, the audio would cut out between 4:09 and 4:13. Glitches, maybe, but I knew what I heard. Eventually, I stopped trying to fix my sleep. I leaned into it. I'd fall asleep with the intention of waking at 4:11. I kept a notepad by my bed, ready to write down any thoughts, sounds, impressions. But night after night, it was the same. I'd wake. I'd listen. I'd hear a faint sound above me. Then silence. There's something about waking up before the world, not like a productive early morning. This is different. This is pre-dawn, the hour where time feels broken, where nothing is watching, but everything could be. That's what made it worse, because after a few weeks I started waking up not to sound, but to a feeling, the sense that I had just been seen, like I had just blinked at the wrong moment, and someone had been looking through that blink. I told myself it was just my nerves, too much caffeine, not enough social interaction, but that didn't explain the goosebumps, or the fact that my cat, a black short hair named Elbow, had started refusing to sleep in the bedroom with me. She'd sit in the hallway, staring at the ceiling hatch, and she never blinked. It was a Saturday when I found the insulation. Pink fiberglass dust scattered across the end of my sheets. Not a lot, just enough to notice. Just enough to suggest something had brushed down through the cracks. I looked up. No holes in the ceiling, no gaps in the molding, no sign that anything had been tampered with. I vacuumed the sheets, ran a hand across the plaster overhead. Nothing crumbled, nothing loose. I told myself maybe it came from a draft, maybe the wind pulled a bit through a vent. But that didn't explain the way it was laid out, not like it had floated down, but like something had stepped in it and left a trace. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat up in bed, facing the door, the hallway light dimmed low. Elbow sat next to me, alert. Her ears would twitch toward the attic hatch every few minutes. At exactly 4:11, she stood. Not a sound, just stood, arched her back, and walked to the edge of the room. Then she stared at the hallway again. A second later, the air changed. You know that feeling when someone walks past you in a room, the pressure shift, the almost imperceptible pull of attention being redirected? I felt that. But no one moved. No one was there. I stood slowly, opened the door. The hallway was empty. I looked up at the hatch. No visible change, no opening, no dust falling. But I saw something. Around the edge of the hatch, barely noticeable, was a faint smudge, like something had brushed against it from the inside, like a palm dragging softly across drywall. I should have called the landlord. Instead, I pulled a chair from the kitchen and stood on it with a flashlight. I examined the hatch. Nothing seemed out of place, but when I pressed my ear to it, I could hear something breathing, not loud, not fast, but real. I jumped down, heart hammering. I locked every door, every window. I closed the bedroom door and shoved my dresser in front of it, and I stayed awake. I didn't move. I didn't breathe too loudly. The next morning, there were more insulation specks on my bed and a small scratch mark on the ceiling, just to the right of the hatch. I called the police. When they arrived, I explained everything. The waking, the sounds, the insulation, the feeling of being watched. They were respectful, but it was clear they didn't expect much. They checked the attic, said it was empty. Dust, cobwebs, nothing else. But I noticed something they didn't comment on. A corner of the insulation had been peeled back, just a few inches, like someone had been lifting it regularly to see through. I asked if they could dust for prints. They said there was no sign of a break-in, no way to prove anyone had been living there. Without evidence of forced entry, they couldn't pursue it further. They suggested I talk to my landlord. They left. I sat down on the edge of my bed and stared at the ceiling. That night I slept in the living room. I didn't wake at 4:11, I woke at 4:10, and the sound I heard, the attic hatch, opening. The landlord didn't believe me. He said the attic was uninhabitable. No floorboards, no space to move around, no lights. But I'd started reading. There were cases, rare ones, of people living in crawl spaces, attics, even between walls, sometimes for days, sometimes for months. A woman in Japan had lived inside a man's cupboard for nearly a year before being discovered. In every case, the key detail was this: unless they were caught red-handed, law enforcement couldn't intervene. The crime wasn't occupancy. It was trespass, theft, breaking and entering. But if nothing was stolen and no one was harmed, then the presence was invisible, legally at least. I called the police again a week later, not because of something I heard, because of what my neighbor saw. She said she was letting her dog out just before dawn when she noticed movement along the rooftops. A person, or something, crawling slowly, barefoot across the shingles between our buildings. She didn't call right away. She said it didn't register as real until the figure stopped, crouched near my chimney, and disappeared. That's when she called. The police came again. This time they brought a thermal scanner, checked the attic, said it was still empty, but I knew better. Because I hadn't slept in my bed in over a week, and yet every morning I'd find the sheets disturbed, sometimes warm, sometimes damp. The police gave me their card, said to call if I saw anything firsthand. But it didn't matter anymore. The real alarm wasn't the sound, it was my body. Because even in the living room, even after staying awake until 2 or 3 a.m., even after taking 2 pills instead of 1, I would still wake at 4:11. Every time, not to a noise, not to a shadow, but to the feeling of something pulling away from me, like a stare being withdrawn, like a gaze turning elsewhere. 2 nights before I moved out, I woke to the sound of a soft thump in the ceiling. Then the faintest creak, then silence. But I didn't move. I just whispered, "I know you're there." And I swear, in that moment, I heard something shuffle backward, slowly, like retreat. When I left the unit for good, I didn't tell the landlord the real reason. He asked if it was the location. I said I needed more space. I didn't mention the insulation, I didn't mention the scratches, and I didn't mention the notebook I'd found tucked in the attic wall behind a beam, filled with times, dates, and short staccato phrases like, "Woke again," 411 watching, "He knows." I burned it. I sleep in a new apartment now, no attic, but some mornings, not all, just some, I wake before my alarm. And when I check the clock, it's always 411. Story 3. He said, "They can't arrest me if they can't see me." This happened to me in 2021 when I was living in Asheville, North Carolina. I was 29 at the time, working remotely as a UX designer. I lived alone in a small one-bedroom apartment near the edge of downtown, just far enough to avoid the nightlife, but close enough that I could walk to most places. I didn't think of myself as paranoid. I had the usual safety habits: lock the door, glance behind me when walking home, avoid posting real-time updates on social media. Basic stuff. The first time it happened, I thought it was a glitch. It was late, around 11:30 p.m., and I was getting ready for bed. I had just powered off my phone and plugged it in on the nightstand. I hadn't set the alarm yet, but I figured I'd do it in the morning. I turned off the light, crawled under the covers, and closed my eyes. That's when I heard the voicemail play, not a ringtone, not a buzz, the actual voicemail audio, loud, clear on speaker, even though my phone was off. I sat up instantly. The voice was male, calm, measured. It said exactly one sentence: "I saw you lock the door." Then a click. The sound didn't come from outside the apartment. It came from my phone, which was still black, still powered down. I stared at it for a long time. Eventually, I turned it on, waited for it to boot. Checked the voicemail app. Nothing. No recent calls, no audio files, no timestamp, not even in the deleted folder. I told myself it had to be something else. Maybe a cached notification from earlier. Maybe my phone had autoplayed something from an app before fully shutting off, but it didn't feel like that. It felt directed. The next day, I combed through my settings, checked call logs, audio apps, even backup folders. Nothing. No trace of audio. No evidence it ever happened. I let it go. A few nights later, it happened again. This time the phone was in my kitchen, charging. I was in the living room watching a show with my laptop open. The audio started mid-sentence. No notification, no preview. "Don't forget to close the curtains." Then silence. I stood frozen. The voice wasn't threatening, just aware, like someone narrating observations, giving reminders I never asked for. I ran to the phone, nothing on screen, notifications blank, call log empty. But I had heard it. I started researching, found stories of phantom notifications, ghost rings, audio glitches. Some people swore their phones would speak words with no input, but most were chalked up to faulty updates or old devices. Mine was less than a year old. The night after that, I turned my phone off and wrapped it in a towel, left it inside a kitchen drawer. I didn't want to hear it. Still, at 2:46 a.m., I woke up. Not to a noise, but to a voice in my ear, whispered, "I know when you wake up." I jolted. There was no one there. The room was dark, still. My phone was still in the drawer. I opened it, turned it on. Nothing, no message, no call. But that's when I realized something I hadn't noticed before. Each of these audio fragments came at moments I was alone, distracted and unguarded. They didn't interrupt, they observed, and they only played when I wasn't holding the phone. It was like they were designed to reach, not to be reviewed. Just impressions, like footprints in fog. And I started to wonder if I was even supposed to have proof, because some messages aren't left for you to keep, only for you to hear. The first time someone else heard it, I felt real panic. It was my friend Brooke. She called me one afternoon, voice tight. "I just got a voicemail from you," she said. "But it wasn't you." I asked what she meant. "It came from your number, says voicemail from Emily, but when I played it..." She paused. "It was a man, just breathing. Then he whispered something. I think he said, "Watch." Just that. Then nothing. I told her I hadn't called anyone that day. I'd been in back-to-back meetings since morning. She sent me a screenshot. The call log said the voicemail came from my number at 3:14 p.m. That was the exact minute I was on a Zoom call. I checked my phone's history. No outgoing calls. Not even a failed attempt. It didn't make sense. We laughed it off, sort of. Brooke was good at brushing things aside, but I could tell it rattled her, and it rattled me more than I admitted, because it meant my number, my identity, was being used, and not just randomly, specifically. I started thinking differently after that. My phone didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt like a proxy, something borrowed, leased. I changed my passcode, logged out of cloud backups, reset permissions. But the next week my mom got a voicemail too. Same thing, my name, my number. But this time, the voice said, "You let her move alone. Why?" She thought it was a prank, or worse, that I had sent it to scare her. I had to convince her it wasn't me, that I was okay, that I didn't even know it happened. The messages stopped for a few days. I stopped turning my phone off. That only seemed to make the voicemails appear without my knowing. I figured maybe staying active would help me catch it. One night I stayed up late, kept the phone in my hand. Nothing happened. At 3:02 a.m., I went to the bathroom. When I came back, I saw it, a voicemail notification on the lock screen. I froze. I hadn't felt the phone ring, hadn't heard a sound. I opened the app. The message was 7 seconds long. It played immediately. Put it down. The voice wasn't angry, just tired. But the timing, exactly when I wasn't looking, and that's when it clicked. It wasn't about using my phone, it was about becoming it, about making me irrelevant. My identity was no longer mine. It was borrowed, and I wasn't the only one who could use it. I reported it to the police. They were polite but unconvinced. I explained everything, the fake voicemails, the number spoofing, the missing audio files. They asked if I'd been threatened. I said, not directly. They asked if I'd lost money or had anyone break in. I said no. They shrugged. "Until there's an actual crime," one of them said, "there's not much we can do." He used the word unsettling, like he was offering it as a concession. I started looking into digital mimicry, spoofing apps, audio scramblers, AI voice splicing. It was possible, all of it. In theory, someone could take a sample of your voice, combine it with caller ID spoofing, and fabricate an entire interaction without being anywhere near you. And if there was no damage, no loss, no violence, then it wasn't technically criminal. It was just discomfort, a private paranoia, a ghost made of bandwidth. I changed numbers twice, got a burner phone, deleted all social media. Then I moved, 2 states over. Quiet town, new job, new address. Nothing shared online. For a while, it worked. The calls stopped. My nights were normal. My phone stayed quiet until one afternoon my upstairs neighbor, a guy named Jeremy, knocked on my door. He looked uncomfortable. "Hey, weird question," he said. "You have a landline?" I said no. He nodded slowly. "Okay, then I'm not crazy." He held up his phone. "I got a voicemail today, just now. It said it was from you." I didn't answer. I just stared. "I didn't listen to the whole thing," he said. "But it started with a guy saying, 'She's mine, not yours.'" He tried to laugh. "Probably a scam or something, right?" I nodded. But my stomach was hollow, because I hadn't given him my number. I hadn't told anyone in town my last name. I hadn't let myself be seen. But it didn't matter, because he didn't need my consent. He didn't need to be near me, and he didn't need to break any law. As long as no one was hurt and no one could trace it, then he was right. They can't arrest you if they can't see you, and he was never seen, not once, but I still hear him. At night, when I plug my phone in, when I blink too long in a dark room. Sometimes it vibrates without lighting up, and I know he's there, listening, waiting, borrowing me.